Hi, Truth Fairy here. Welcome back to TFT, Truth Fairy Tidbits, where I attempt to spoon feed you little bite-sized pieces of information that you otherwise probably wouldn't look at. So, if you don't know who I am, what I'm doing here, please go back to the beginning of my videos and start from the introduction. It'll explain what I'm trying to do, and then you will be able to catch up to where we're at right now in this book, No Treason, Constitution of No Authority by Lysander Spooner. Okay, I'm going to jump in, and then I'm going to be gone all of next week, so some of you are probably cheering about that. So I just want to finish up this chapter real quick. Basically, just a couple of more points that he's making here at the end of this that just really going to drive it home that our government has only ever existed by force. All governments only ever exist by force. They have finagled us into believing our whole lives that we consent to it and that voting changes anything. It doesn't. There are no sides. We'll get into that later. But yeah, the whole point of this first chapter is just trying to prove that none of us have consented. The government does not rest on consent. The Constitution is completely useless and pointless. So yeah, I'm going to just finish up this chapter and then you won't have to listen to me for a week. Okay, here we go. Let's see. One essential of a free government is that it rests wholly on voluntary support. And one certain proof that a government is not free is that it coerces more or less persons to support it against their will. A government is like a church or any other institution in these respects. There is no other criteria whatsoever by which to determine whether a government is a free one or not than the single one of its depending or not depending solely on voluntary support. Our government does not work on voluntary support. You just convince people that it does. It's crazy. No middle ground is possible on this subject. Either taxation without consent is robbery, or it is not. If it is not, then any number of men who choose may at any time associate, call themselves government, assume absolute authority, walk all over the weaker than themselves, plunder them at will, kill them if they resist. If, on the other hand, taxation without consent is robbery, it necessarily follows that every man who has not consented to be taxed has the same natural right to defend his property against a tax gatherer that he has to defend against a highwayman. Highwaymen being robbers, I'm guessing. That's what it means. Okay, a couple more points. So long as the government is a mere contest as to which of two parties shall rule the other, the weaker must always succumb. And whether the contest be carried on with ballots or bullets, the principle is the same. For under the theory of government now prevailing, the ballot either signifies a bullet or it signifies nothing. The result, and a natural one, has been that we have had government, state, and national devoted to nearly every grade and species of crime that governments have ever practiced upon their victims. And these crimes have culminated in a war that has cost millions of lives, a war carried on upon one side for chattel slavery and on the other for political slavery, upon neither for liberty, justice, or truth. And these crimes have been committed and this war waged by men and these descendants of men who less than 100 years ago said that all men were equal and could owe neither service to individuals nor allegiance to governments except with their own consent. No attempt or pretense that was ever carried into practical operation against civilized men, unless possibly the pretense of a divine right on the part of some to govern and enslave others, embodies so much of shameless absurdity, falsehood, impudence, robbery, usurpation, tyranny, and villainy of every kind as the attempt or pretense of establishing a government by consent and getting the actual consent of only so many as may be necessary to keep the rest in subjection by force. Such a government is a mere conspiracy of the strong against the weak. It no more rests on consent than does the worst government on earth. What substitute for their consent is offered to the weaker party, whose rights are thus annihilated, struck out of existence by the stronger? Only this: their consent is presumed. That is, these usurpers condescendingly and graciously presume that all those whom they enslave consent to surrender all their life, liberty, and property into the hands of those who thus usurp dominion over them. And it is presented that this presumption of their consent, when no actual consent has been given, is sufficient to save the rights of the victims and to justify the usurpers. As well might a highwayman pretend to justify himself by presuming that the traveler consents to part with his money. As well might the assassin justify himself by simply presuming that his victim consents to part with his life. As well might the holder of chattel slaves attempt to justify himself by presuming that they consent to his authority and to the whips and the robbery which he practices upon them. The presumption is simply a presumption that the weaker party consent to be slaves. Such is the presumption on which alone our government relies to justify the power it maintains over its unwilling subjects. And it was to establish that presumption as perpetual law of this country that so much money and blood have been expended. That's the end of that chapter, and it's should be self-explanatory by that. That's how our government works. They convince you that you have a say-so in what they do to you. They pit sides against each other when there are no sides. And then the losers of the election, it's just presumed that because you're born here and because you practice your right to vote, that means you consent. And somehow, over a couple hundred years, this fuckery has become common knowledge. And not only that, but the way that statists defend this and act like we live in the greatest country in the world, and we have freedom here, and you are allowed to vote. And you know what? All of like the worst governments in history that flat out like slaughtered their people, which was already happening here, they all had constitutions too. Okay, they had votes too. They had elections too. And somehow people still pretend that's not what's going on here. It's wild to me. I mean, it took me a long time to figure this out too, but it's because the information has never been presented. I don't know how I stumbled upon this stuff. Honestly, I can't. I wish I could. I wish I like listed my steps as I went, because it would be easier to share with people that way. So I'm trying to go back to the things that I know like blew my head open, like this book and like Larkin Rose's book. We'll get into that soon. The information, that's what I'm trying to do. Okay, I'm losing track. I still have vacation brain. I'm leaving in the morning. Trying to present this information that's never been presented to me, because it's only been about 6 years that I started coming across this stuff. And they make sure of that because they own the school system, they own the medical system, they own the food system, everything that has been designed to keep the uppers in the system where they are. Okay, they give you the government programming through school of America's always been the good guys, and we have freedom here, and you're so lucky to be in America, and you have rights, and you should vote, and patriotism, and America, and all that bullshit. And so how else is people going to come across this stuff? And then there's people like us that try to get out and share it when they come across it, and then you get yelled at and called crazy and stupid, and I'm a libtard because, you know, King Pedo is, I don't worship fucking pedophiles. It's so exhausting, you guys. It's so frustrating, exhausting. And like I said a couple videos ago, I think, like, the waking up process is not fun. And this is part of the reason, because when you find out truth that you know can help people, and you instantly want to go share it and be like, look, holy shit, like, we've been lied to our whole lives. This is crazy. How do they get away with this? And that's how they get away with it, because you get yelled at and called stupid. And I'm like, fuck's sake, dude, I'm trying to, it's right here, just look at it, and people can't see it. It's wild. Oh, it's so exhausting, guys. But you know what? I go through my phases of like, fuck it, there's nothing I can do. Like, I'm just gonna go make a fucking cocktail, which I can't wait to do later today. And then, you know, you go through the depression moments of like, oh my God, like, this is never gonna change. There's no hope. Especially when you online and listen to these people with like rah for psychopaths that are just literally and figuratively raping everybody. Like, and people are cheering for it and getting mad just when you try to point out blatantly obvious bullshit that's going on. But then I started doing this and I got excited because even maybe nobody's ever going to watch my shit, but at least it gets it out of my brain. And it's just really, I'm trying to vent the frustration and being like, this is so easy to understand. It's so simple. We don't need all of this bullshit. And I told, at some point we'll get into the, government isn't necessary. When we get into Larkin's book, he's really good at that. So yeah, I'm rambling again. You know what? I haven't rambled in a minute, so suck on it. I guess that's it. I'll leave you there for a week. We're done with that chapter, so maybe, if you're still like confused, pondering these things, go back and watch the videos again. Really listen to what this guy is saying, and it will start to click eventually, I swear, and then your brain is going to explode. But then you'll be prepared for, as we move on, to actually take in and be able to consider more information, and because it gets bigger. So I'm gonna leave it there for today. I'm going on vacation. So you guys have a good week. You guys, whoever's 2 people that have watched these, maybe. I don't care. Makes me feel better. And I got a puppy on my lap. Yeah, that's it. I'll be back in a week. And as always, do not comply. Bye.